Welcome back to Screenfish Radio. It is so wonderful to have you here, and I am so thrilled. It is so wonderful to have my guests this week, Amanda Jane Smith and Miriam Ibrahim. I'm so glad you could join us. Welcome back, ladies.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Us.
Well, I am so glad that you joined us because this week we are talking about Pam and Tommy, the miniseries on Disney Plus, which is so fun to say. Technically it's Star Plus,
Yeah,
and Hulu in the States. But no, I'm really excited about this group to have this conversation because I think this is a series which has provided a little bit of controversy, but has had some very interesting things to say, and I'm glad that you could join me to talk about this.
I was just going to say it is rather jarring, I find, to go through Disney, like the Disney catalog, and then all of a sudden you see all these, not family-friendly titles. I'm still adjusting to that.
Well, you could watch this or Encanto. It's
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me. Pam and Tommy tells the story of Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee, who, after a whirlwind romance, got married and created a tape of themselves being intimate with one another, which was stolen and released to the public. The series stars Sebastian Stan, Lily James, Seth Rogen, and Nick Offerman. As always, this podcast is rated S for spoilers, just so that you are aware. But ladies, I would love to know what you think of Pam and Tommy.
That's a big question. I will say that it took me several episodes to get into it. I found the first couple really jarring. And then I shamefully did a lot of Googling after each episode to figure out like how much of this is actually true, what really happened, what's the timeline look like. Some of those pieces, and interestingly, and I think you called this out to me about kind of gaze, male gaze and female gaze. I really started getting connected to the story when they switched from male directors to female directors, which is interesting, I think. But that's the point. So around episode 5 is really where it started to. I connected in a lot more, and I wasn't just watching for the sensationalism or because I had committed to podcasting about it or any of those pieces, but actually got into the story.
Should we tease Mira about her shamefully Googling as soon as she described in her description?
I Googled too. I was Googling while watching. I was just like, I need like sidebars to this train wreck I'm watching.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I will say, I have never seen the footage. So I was morbidly curious. I still haven't seen it, but I can remember vaguely hearing about it and knowing that other people had seen the footage. So similar to Mira, the first 2 episodes, I almost wanted to turn it off. I was just like, ugh, I don't care about anybody. I don't feel anything for anyone. They're all vapid, Hollywood, uncaring people. But it happened quicker for me, actually, Miriam, that in episode 3, I started to see where they were going in terms of, vulnerability and violations of privacy, and no matter how much somebody might be a jerk, this crosses a line. And so I by episode 3, I was like, oh, I'm already starting to feel things for people. And then I was just carried away and almost couldn't stop watching for the rest of it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you've said that, because I remember, like, I got this as a screener. And I know that they released the first 3 episodes to start. And the first 2 episodes, I was getting upset because I'm like, who is this for? Who is this series for? Who made this? Yeah. But by the end of the 3rd episode, you can start to feel the shift, or I felt you could start to feel the shift happening. And I thought, okay, now we're getting somewhere interesting. And I mean, there's also this, I mean, people who have listened to this, our podcast before, know how bored I am with Sebastian Stan in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, I mean,
this is not a Bucky Barnes Sebastian Stan by any stretch.
I found that Sebastian Stan was what he, when a character is so, you just like it, just a shitty person, but the actor does such a good job that you have a hard time cleaving the two. I was like, he's kind of got that curse going on where I'm just like, oh, I don't want to see or hear. Right. But eventually he even gets a little bit of, he shares some vulnerability too. I figured out, I think, why I started being invested already in episode 3. And that was the whole baby plot line, right? It's such a powerful, I find, plot point when you want to start caring about people. And I can only speak as a woman and a mother, but once they wanted to try and have a baby and they were potentially losing their baby or having trouble with conception, then I was just like, oh, they became human beings to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're right. Like some parts early on, like the whole, we're saving ourselves for marriage. They got married 4 days later. Like, it's just, and their entire courtship was like a drug and alcohol fueled.
Yeah,
I don't know, but it was like basically an 4-day acid trip, and then they got married. Like, come on.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, you didn't feel too much for them, and it was I'm sure it was meant to be comical, right? The come down when they're on the plane talking to each other about like, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite food? And it's just like, ugh, they have really nothing in common. Yeah, which was an interesting juxtaposition, like where because the rest of the story I find is quite a romance, like it's a love story to a degree about them and the relationship. It was interesting to first call out how little they really had any foundation other than their sexual chemistry and the way they sort of idolized each other. But that's the thing with movies and TV. They're going to pick and choose which parts to highlight and spend time with when a relationship is complex, and much more nuanced. But I derailed you, Steve. You were talking about Sebastian Stan.
No, I think you've all covered exactly what I was saying. There, like, his character is awful. He's an awful guy, but see, this was actually what I thought was so interesting about the series. These are characters that we only know from their image. That's how we know them. And I grew up in the 90s. I remember being told that Baywatch is great because it's got this hot woman, Pamela Anderson, in it, and Tommy
Canadian.
Canadian. I was so glad they brought that in. I was like, they're wearing BC Lions jersey. This is good.
Right? Yeah.
Except that Lily James, I feel like she pronounced it Canada. Like she gave it a little too much proper pronunciation. It was like Canadians would just say Canada.
Say that. Yeah.
It's true.
It's Toronto instead of Toronto. You're like,
yeah. But let's cut her some slack. We haven't gotten to that part yet, but let's cut Lily James some slack because her representation was incredible.
Oh my gosh, the both of them actually. They did a very good job of embodying the character.
Oh my God, the transformation.
This is the thing that I loved about the series is you had these two characters that the performances are so strong that these people that I only knew by the image I was sold, gives them this is gross over speaking, but gives them a soul. Like I cared about them as human beings and as people. Yeah. Especially her as the series goes on. As the series shifts, we'll talk about this too. It shifts more to her. Like I'm like, this is a fully fledged person, and we've only ever been sold her physical appearance. And this is what I thought of the series. And even like I think I said to you both, I can understand normally Disney Plus does the first 2 episodes of a series to hook you in. They had to do the first 3 because if you ended on the end of that second episode, and the second episode in terms of content and story is wild, but no one would have watched it again.
Yeah.
Maybe out of morbid curiosity for how the tape was going to end up
Sure.
circulating. But yeah, it really grated on me for sure, because they were focused more, I found, on the superficial aspects, although not of what's his name, Rand, right? They gave Rand a bit of a backstory early on.
Yeah.
So they, setting up, okay, what would drive a man to such violation, and no prior criminal activity,
and also no awareness that it was a violation, right? Such a powerful storyline. And I'm just going to add to both Sebastian Stan and Lily James. I would also add that Seth Rogen and Nick Offerman, man, I don't know where Nick found his inner creep, but he was creepy. So slimy.
His eyes always bloodshot and just
they all acted supremely well. But I will say, and I'm even going to throw Taylor Schilling in there as the porn star ex of Rand. But just his complete and total lack of self-awareness, and his the morality that he put on it was like karma, vengeance. Even I think the second last episode was called Destroyer of Worlds. Like a real sense of it. It made me think a lot of our current modern realities with are they called incels? Right. So an incel is they're called it's a retraction for involuntary celibates. And so do you remember in Toronto, actually, I worked at Young and Finch when this happened, the guy who drove his car and was intentionally trying to kill people on the sidewalk and was arrested by police, etc. So a group of, I'll call them marginalized, whether it's self-marginalized or otherwise we can put on the shelf for a bit, but tends to be men who have a serious grudge against, often it's women, and a belief that they are celibate because there's something wrong with women in society. And so they tend to kind of lash out and again, see their cause as noble and as appropriately vengeful. And so that I drew that parallel with kind of Rand in the 90s, was this sense of, I'm not doing anything wrong. Like even near the end when he finally confessed to Taylor Schilling and she freaked on him and he's like, what's the big deal? It's just porn.
Yeah.
It's not.
And Taylor Schilling for a moment got to be the voice of audience, right? Or at least me. I'm sitting there going like, how could you even consider this porn? Totally unconsensual.
Yeah.
And
what an interesting gray area, because of who they were, because of what she had previously done, because of her modeling, because there are aspects of Pamela Anderson who very consciously and consensually has made profit off her image. But still, it's so clear to me that there is a line between that and taking someone's sacred private home video.
Yes. And the other thing that jumped out to me too, that I, to your point, Steve, about Pamela Anderson is, so growing up, and I was a Baywatch fan, before she was on it, I think I didn't watch as much after she joined, just point in time. But she was really, her public image was that a very sexual one, and and I didn't realize it was intentional, an intentionally vapid one, which you pick up on when she is doing her interviews near the end, or when she's on Jay Leno.
Yeah,
she has that one moment of clarity of, are you kidding me? This is devastating, and you're profiting off it. To then and go back to.
I couldn't find that. I saw a clip of her on Jay Leno, actually Pam Anderson on Jay Leno, but it wasn't the scene that we see in the series. So did she actually say that on Jay Leno?
It's two interviews.
I don't know, because I also Googled quite a bit and couldn't find it.
It was the same dress. It was the same timeline. I made sure when I YouTubed, but.
Yeah, no, I sent you both the link. It was actually, there were two interviews merged into one. And so that conversation took place, but they took two and put them into one. She actually says, are you kidding? I couldn't find the video either. but I forget what the website was. I think it was Slate, but I could be wrong, that, they were going through each episode saying, this is what actually was, and how
Yeah.
as with any dramatic representation of a story, they played license with some things. Sure.
Yeah.
But yes, there was truth to that. And Leno actually, people, Leno is in a distant memory for so many people, but Leno's ratings were failing until he had Hugh Grant on, and he did the same thing. Because Hugh Grant.
Oh, the Divine Brown scandal, right? Where
he slept around. Yes, that's right. With because he was with Elizabeth Hurley at the time, and everybody refers to that as the moment he saved his show, because he called him out. So this was after, and so he sort of swung for the fences again with her, and I think this series does an excellent job portraying again, there's this reality of the image that she's being sold and who she really is. And I think time plays something to do with it. And I'm not saying that justifies anything, because it doesn't justify a thing. But remember, theirs was the first. So whereas Rand,
were they pre Rob Lowe and his sex tape, and pre
I don't know if it was pre Rob Lowe, but they're the first ones to go worldwide with it.
Yeah.
I mean, this was pre Kardashian, pre Hilton. This was the first big one. So, I mean, we look back on it now, and I agree. Like the conversation, like, Amanda, you're saying, like, from the audience, I said the same thing. I'm like, no. It is still different. It is different. But it would be interesting to think from that industry at that point of time, whether someone like Rand would have even made that distinction, because it was also one of the first ones in his mind. I'm not justifying. I can see it. Sorry.
The more you explore, like, the various themes, and like the series is about so much more than just Pam and Tommy. As you start digging in, it could also be seen as it's a series about the beginning of the internet in culture, and the beginning of our lives no longer being private as soon as we upload anything to the internet. And perhaps that's why, writers and producers saw this as a really good story to tell, because maybe Pam and Tommy's tape it certainly wasn't first, it wasn't the last, but it was the one that evolved right at that moment where the internet was catching on. And there was this like series of events that created this perfect storm of making it able to go viral. And I got the sense, although I'm not really good with like technical and technology and internet stuff, but I feel as though perhaps even the sex tape informed and expedited the process of the internet becoming more savvy, and people being able to know how to circulate video footage and monetize on that, which is a whole Pandora's box of like porn on the internet. And
yeah. Even as you come to the end with the Wachowski, was that his name? That piece, right? Students, like, wow. I also think, so you're right. So there's so many super important kind of themes, right? So privacy is one, projected image versus actual self is another. But I also think the gender divide is massive in this story. And I think the scary thing about that truth is that we're not that far off it today. We haven't actually grown and developed from that point in time. Sometimes so I remember watching Hotel Rwanda and realizing this happened when I was in high school, and I was completely unaware of the genocide in Rwanda, and that hitting me really hard. Like, how could these world events be happening and we're totally oblivious to them? Can't believe it happened in my lifetime. Or there was another one where Charlize Theron was a minor and she was one of the only female minors. I can't remember the movie, but I remember her going in the porta potty, and as a joke, the males knocked it over, so she ends up covered in excrement. And again, that happened like in the not that distant past, and you have this moment of, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is still happening. I don't know if I've just become more cynical, or my eyes are wider open, but I watched this and I thought, not only is this totally resonating because, yep, but also because that's kind of still our experience today on a lot of things.
Look at the cell phone hacks. Remember, that was what, 5 years ago? The cell phone hacks years ago, where all those celebrity or female celebrities had their phones hacked and their most intimate pictures thrown on the internet. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Well, and also the gender divide. I mean, we're still arguing for equal pay. We're still arguing for, when a man says to his employer, I'm about to start a family, it's very different than when a woman says, I'm about to start a family. Will she not be offered a promotion over the next few years? Yeah, there's still, and it's very explicit, and it becomes really overt in the conversations between Pam and Tommy when she's trying to say to him, like, this is not the same for you as it is for me.
Oh yeah. I thought that was a really, like, and his, again, total oblivion to it. And she was like, what, because you're a big movie star? And she's like, no, because I'm a woman.
Yeah.
And even like they show you the face of the website, it's not Pam and Tommy's sex tape.
No,
it's Pam's hardcore sex, blah, 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 whatever it says. It's all centered on her. When she's in the room with the lawyers and they're basically steamrolling her. And she's like, I'm worried that this could be what happens. And they steamroll her. And then later she's like, you led me down a path, and it's exactly what I knew was going to happen.
Yeah.
But it reminded me so much. And I run into this all the time in the workplace, where like a woman will say something and nobody's listening. And then a man says the same thing and suddenly it's the best idea. And I've seen it happen. Men talk over women in meetings all the time. Like it's, and I think even when she's having the conversation with her publicist, right? And the publicist says, I could have told you this was a bad idea. And she goes, well, I was in a room full of men. I couldn't say no. And the publicist was like, I've been saying no to men my whole life. And Pam was like, well, I've been taught never to. Like, this is basically how we are raised, is not to push, not to question.
Yeah. And whether or not it came into play, I mean, the publicist was still a beautiful woman, but a very different looking woman than Pamela. So if you were to, walk a mile in Pamela's shoes, her entire adult life and perhaps some of her childhood was praised for how she looked, right? Like she built her identity, her success, her financial stability, all on her appearance and that exuding of sexuality. And so her approach to how to be in a room with men, it had never before been, I need to say no to you, or I need to, but then interestingly, they weave in that idea of her trying to do the monologue on Baywatch, and, the director, producer, all men are just like, no, we rather you just, look pretty. So in building empathy for Pamela, we sort of get the experience that, she doesn't know how, she's never had the tools to know how to do this and stand up to them.
Yeah. And she starts to build them slowly. Like, I think you're absolutely right. Like that scene where he's about to go kind of attack Jay Leno, and she says no. And then she says, I'm going to go to the hotel and I'm going to go by myself tonight.
Yeah.
And this is your job for the next 3 days or until the premiere, or because I did develop a little bit of sympathy for Tommy Lee. And it's funny because I spent a lot of time kind of trying to justify and build sympathy. And I think the story also spends a lot of time offering like a redemption arc, for example, for Rand, et cetera. And it was just this morning that I was like, stop justifying their behavior. Stop it. Stop trying to find a reason why it's okay, or it's not so bad, or it wasn't okay. And it just needs to sit as not okay.
Yeah.
But I spent a good amount of time going, but look, he's trying to be supportive. He just doesn't know better. Look, he's trying to be a good husband. He just doesn't know better.
Well, that makes you a good human being, Miriam, I think, so two things. I think as human beings, I think it's important to exercise a certain amount of compassion for everyone, right? But compassion is different than allowance. Or, forgiveness or condoning. And then also when you think of it through filmmaking, we need to have heroes and villains. We need to have people that we root for and that we feel something for, and people that we get angry with. Of course, in the last 20 years, those heroes and villains have become less black and white, more gray. So, you know, by the middle to end of the series, everybody's kind of a jerk, but also everyone you feel for. Tommy Lee's character, I think, gets the least energy devoted to any kind of redemption or sympathy. But there are a few powerful moments they choose to zero in on. One being when he's really sad after the miscarriage. And I really liked that. And then also you see him looking at his platinum albums on the wall, and, you know, that you spend a bit of time with him sifting through MTV. And I think it's meant to be, although I don't know how much we do, but like, shit, you know, he peaked so early and now he's this like floundering man who is talented and loves what he does, but is left without much of an identity. But ultimately, like, I think you can be both. I think you can exercise compassion and empathy for a person while at the same time very clearly saying, like, as an adult, you can't do these
It's
things.
not okay. Yeah.
It's not okay.
Yeah.
You were once a wounded child. I get that. And if you were still a child, we would help you and take care of you, but you're grown now.
Yeah.
So you fucking just give your contractor back his toolbox, you jerk.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's very interesting because by the end of the series, I feel like the series becomes so much more of an apology for what took place. And I could be wrong on that, but we see that with Rand. Rand at the end, Rand at the end is no longer justifying what he does or what he did. He is saying, in fact, you sense the needle is shifted a little bit with him, probably more than Tommy, in terms of understanding the depth of his hurt. And he tries, if I remember correctly, he tries to make it right in some way or another. He doesn't go to her. Does he? No.
He does end up selling the master copy to Wachowski, but he gives the money to his ex-wife, right, to get a divorce.
Oh, he gives it to her.
Yeah,
that's right. Yes.
So his karma or his ends is much more within his little world.
Yeah.
It doesn't extend to Pamela and Tommy in the end.
Yes,
he tries to apologize, right? Like you see him running up to the car and he's like, I'm sorry. And I don't know that it counts for much really at that point in time, but yeah.
Well, yeah, and he sees the lookalike at the outside the movie theater, and so he tries to apologize to her. But I don't know. I don't know what they could have done with that anyway, because the genie was so far out of the bottle at that point, you know.
Yeah, way beyond anything he controlled. And I must say, there's some parts that the irony of it was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Like when he goes to yell at the guy selling the copies in Tower Records, like what you're doing is wrong.
I know. But I'm sure in there is like a bigger metaphor of copyright in our society now with the internet. Like we've all probably been guilty of taking an image and putting it on our feed or whatever for a good laugh or something. But like at the end of the day, somebody took the time to craft that.
Yeah.
Or whatever, or it's their private image and nobody gave you permission to use it, let alone profit off of it.
Yeah, it's so true. Or when he goes into the video Tower Records and tries to sell it, and the guy's like, I can't buy this. And he goes, you got a guy outside. He's like, well, how do I know yours is the original and the other guy's isn't? Like, well, how's yours not a fake? And he's like, because I was first. And he was so yes. And you're like, oh, so the first thief is okay? Really? That's your line?
You gotta laugh that one of the most morally upright characters in this series are the porn producers who will not take the tape without a release form. You're like, thank you. Somebody is like a good person.
It's so true. So true. Yeah. Yeah. It's so true.
Well, with that in mind, I we're already talking about this anyway, but I was wondering what you both think this series contributes to that conversation, because I mean, this is a conversation about so many things. This film's about so many things, but this even the way that we view sexuality or even pornography that is in this series. I was wondering what you thought the series contributed to that conversation, if anything?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it does quite a bit. And I even, so I had this thought as well. In the first 2 episodes, they're the most sexually graphic, right? And then it sort of mellows from there. And so interestingly, every time they cut to Pam and Tommy having sex, it's very much, I don't know, I'm going to call it traditionally porn. I don't know what else to say about it. It's not particularly engaging, or like, for me as a viewer, I wasn't like, oh, see, they're connecting. Oh, I appreciate the intention was to show that they had very strong sexual chemistry, but I don't know, just looked like really bad porn to me. It wasn't, it didn't add to the story in any way. And the other sex that they show the whole way through, so like when Rand goes to talk to Milty, and they're on a porn set, or he's going to give money to Taylor, Schilling, his ex-wife, on a porn set. Again, it's very like porny. There's no connection in it. There's no, I don't know, humanity is the wrong word, but it's very like physical and dissociated, in my opinion.
No intimacy.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's more intimacy in those scenes where they're Tommy and Pam are lying in bed together. I found those to be really intimate and personal when you saw them. Yeah. Yes. So much intimacy when he's on the floor upset about the miscarriage, or even when they're driving home from the hospital post miscarriage, and he just kisses her hand. Right? Like when he makes her dinner. Like they're so But I did think that was interestingly juxtaposed at the end with Taylor Schilling's speech about kind of like the what they loved about the sex tape is actually that it should have been something that's like, oh, this isn't okay, but it captured the intimacy, it captured the connection. And a lot had to do with, like, you know, she makes that comment about, look at the camera angle, because Pam's the one in the camera. What is she focusing on? His face. And that was interesting to me, because I felt like that was a bit of even an arc for the storytellers on what our perspective is. Yeah. Now, I want to ask, so again, I have never seen the tape. I heard about it. And of course, I have the vantage point, we're in hindsight, right? And I read the Rolling Stones article, and it's very clear now that the tape was stolen. But if I put myself back in the 90s, I guess the popular consensus was this idea that Pam and Tommy had leaked it themselves, right? As a career boon for them. But do you honestly think that people, I have never seen the footage, but from what I hear, like, could you honestly watch that and think that they did that on purpose to show other people? It just seemed to me it was so obviously private. Oh, that's a good question. I don't think I've seen it either. I don't think I have. I guess it, like, but remember the part that they, you're right. Because even on Jay Leno, they show the bit where he honks like the boat horn with his penis, right? That was really just do that. The jokes just write themselves. Yeah. And then in the deposition, which, we need to talk about that. Oh my God. Yeah. But in the deposition, I think they allude to a part where she's performing oral sex on him. I'm assuming while they're driving, like on a road. Right? So I don't know how relevant it is. I did really like that scene with Taylor Schilling and her, girlfriend, and the voice of like, gosh, that was really intimate. And maybe, and again, I think I read an article that said that might've been another reason why the tape ended up being so popular, other than because it was so voyeuristic, and we got to see the intimacy of this couple's life. So going back to your question, Steve, for me, again, in hindsight, watching the series, it's not pornography. I don't even think it The only thing it does to contribute to the dialogue around pornography for me is to say, here's an example of what is not pornography. There was nothing consensual. There was nothing manufactured. This was not intended to be circulated for others. This was not porn. It was a video for two people between themselves doing something for themselves.
Yeah.
But if you want to talk about the problems with the porn industry, we can talk about lack of consent in porn and shoddy distribution of porn, but I don't really know much about that world, and that's not really, I'm sure, what we're going to talk about in this hour together.
No,
it's not porn, and anybody who thinks it's porn needs an education on consensuality.
Yeah.
Agreed. Go ahead, Mir.
No, I totally agree. I think the only thing I was going to say on the porn side, which you're right, is not a discussion for today, is I've watched a couple of documentaries, and the exploitative nature of pornography is I think a huge issue.
Which may explain why there was so many confused males out there because they're used to seeing what is rather not obviously consensual in porn. Ugh.
And it's heart-wrenching. And I mean, obviously this is not, I don't think I've seen the tape either, quite frankly. But am I wrong? Okay, I want to, because I saw them in the screeners, and screeners are always complete. When they show the tape, and you saw it on Disney Plus, when they show the tape, did they show a blank screen?
No, you see footage, but they always would cut to audio when it was actual intercourse, like penetration. So you saw her swimming a bit. You saw him with the horn honk thing. You don't see very much.
I think though that what you see isn't the actual tape. I think what you see is Sebastian Stan and Lily James recreating portions of the tape.
Okay, right. The reason I say that, and I can't believe I'm saying that, I should go back and check, because in the copies that I got, because they were screeners, whenever the tape was shown, almost any time that anybody who wasn't supposed to see the tape was watching it, like the scene when she comes out and the tape is in the VCR and all the staff are standing there, it's a blank screen. It's the TV's off.
Interesting.
And the only time that we see even the tape on that I've seen is when she's watching it. There's a scene at the end where she is sitting in front of the couch and the tape is on. You don't see anything. You see them getting into the water. But every other time they show the tape, they either cut away or it's a black screen on the TV. And I found that.
I definitely saw earlier than that. Okay. I saw a little bit of footage of the actors recreating the tape. So I don't know what was going on there for you.
Well, maybe that was just an unfinished thing. But I thought it was profound. I was like, this is exactly the point. I'm not supposed to have this tape.
I was tempted for a minute in, wanting to do my homework for the podcast. I was like, maybe I'll just Google the sex tape. And then I was like, no, I'm not. I am not going to be one more person who clicks on and perpetuates the circulating of this tape.
That was non-consensual and stolen. Yeah.
Yes. No, I'm not going to do it.
I see, that was one of the things I thought was great. I was like, I really wonder if it's that way. And I just missed it. Maybe the final edits were not, but for the scene, I thought this is exactly the point. And
that's interesting. It would have been really interesting. And maybe just on audio that likens
that's what it was.
Do you remember when, what was his name? The documentary filmmaker who did the 9/11 doc. And remember at the beginning, he didn't show the footage of the towers collapsing. He just played the audio.
Was that Michael Moore's documentary?
Michael Moore's documentary. Yeah. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, it's true. It does bring up a really interesting moral point of, in protesting the privacy being stolen, you're recreating and giving us view to the thing that was stolen that nobody's supposed to see because it was supposed to be private.
And that's happening in Hollywood right now. Like, in a way, I loved this series and I loved getting, to see how the story happened and to feel for the different characters. But we're still watching actors and a story making money off of Pamela and Tommy Lee having been victims of burglary. And okay, maybe it didn't totally tank their careers. They weren't exactly winning, in their acting and music anyway, but Hollywood still, it's still a form of exploitation, even though it is a more well-rounded telling of the story.
And when you consider that she had, my understanding is that she didn't sign off on this. He did.
So I didn't realize that he did. I thought neither of them had. So I know that
a
lot of the script was taken from. Oh, he did. Okay, because I thought a lot of the content was taken from the Rolling Stone article, and then he wrote, I guess, an autobiography, or there's a biography about him, which is where they got the whole idea about him having the conversation with his penis. Like that was directly from his own memoir.
Yeah.
But she has since signed on to a Netflix documentary. I guess, to tell the story. Yeah.
Well, I'm just so curious, what would she be signing or not signing off on? And how do you get to tell a series if you don't get the permission of the person the series is about?
Good question.
I don't know how that works, because obviously this was not even technically, they could have said unauthorized or put anything up there. And maybe that's because my understanding is that Tommy Lee was involved, but certainly, she has not spoken about it, and Lily James hopes that she sees it. But it is another layer. It's another layer. It's like, well, has her story been
I can imagine Lily James, Lily James was incredible. And the story really is a story of Pamela, of what was done wrong to Pamela and to women like Pamela. And so you can see why, I'm sure in a way you'd be like, why wouldn't Pamela want this story told? It's so in favor of her, but at the same time, that's not our decision to make. That's not our call to make.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if somebody tomorrow decided to take a series of events that happened in your life and made a movie about it, regardless of if good or makes you look bad? How would that feel? And then people watch that, and then people make up their mind what they think of you and how they care about you. And then they talk to their neighbors and go, oh, this is what happened. That's what happened. And meanwhile, the entire time you're sitting there going, none of you were there. I'm the one who lived it. What a strange time we live in, where people can take interpretations and declare them truth, completely removed from the person who it actually was. They construct, and we live within a time of narratives that might be true, might be amped up a bit for the screen. And for the most part, we just, as consumers and audience, we just go, okay, cool, thanks. I'm entertained by this.
I have an unrelated question that is for both of you, because you definitely will know this better than I do. So I'd mentioned kind of early on that it really was around when they switched from male director to female directors that I kind of hooked into the story a little bit deeper. And so again, I did a whole bunch of Googling post almost every episode. And so in the episode where she's on Jay Leno, Lake Bell is the director. And I read an interview where Lake Bell talked about how in the script, the line was just, she walks onto the show. But as somebody who had experienced kind of being a guest on a talk show, Lake kind of described the importance of what she wanted to feed into the stress and the anticipation of that walk from your dressing room to actually being in the chair with Jay. And so you see, it's not an extended scene, but there's more to it than just her walking. And it got me thinking about, and I never thought about this before, I'll be honest. I mostly enjoy movies for their entertainment value. I haven't dug into the depth of kind of the process always, but it really got me wondering about the level of impact that a director has on the script. Because in my head, I was like, script's the script. They're just, maybe the visual is a bit different, but they're just driving the representation of the script. But that comment that Lake made in the interview about how she shifted the emphasis in that really got me wondering,
Mm.
and then got me wondering if that's part of why I connected deeper into the second half of the series, because the perspective had shifted to something that resonated more with me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that, walking down the hall to go on.
Well, I mean, this goes into a conversation of voice and gaze, right? And I think that's one of the things when I first started the series, I had no idea who it was for. And I mean, as a man, I'm watching it and I'm like, these guys are not cool. Like, am I going to watch does it think it's Ocean's 11? Like, what is it with one guy, you know, getting his due, you know, but is that as Lake Bell and the other women directors started to input more, you could sense the story shift its voice. And that's what I found appealing. Like, this was a story that I thought, my goodness, you start here, but you're shifting it along the way. And I thought that was a really effective cultural narrative too, because this is where we started. And no, things may be the same, but we're trying. And as a man watching it, I'm watching it saying, I'm trying. Like, I couldn't stand, what's his name? Seth Rogen.
Rand.
Rand. I couldn't stand Rand the entire movie. I couldn't stand him. But I felt that the series was starting to shift and make those adjustments. I can't speak to that moment that you're talking about with her going on the talk show. But I mean, you just get the sense that there's a bit more of understanding and not understanding in the sense of this is okay, that's not what I'm saying, but more understanding in the script of what she's going through and the depth. This is not just about the visuals of a tape. There's a depth here, and men don't get it. Some men don't want to get it. You know, some men just don't want to get it. And some men, I hope I'm one of them, are trying to understand and trying to listen and trying to be reshapen so that, you know, like I said, with Pam in the 90s, we were sold her as an image, and I'm not blaming her. I'm saying that's what, as a man, I was sold. Hey, did you see this hot girl on Baywatch? You know, there's other ones too, but Pam Anderson. Even the fact, like the whole thing about the beer commercial, she's picked the way that she's discovered at a football game because she's attractive. And this understanding of the depth of how wrong that is, I feel like has been coming along. Like, the gaze on this series, I think is so important. And I think that and no, regardless of the scene, it's who's telling the story shapes how that story is told.
Oh yeah. And to Miriam's point, TV and film are visual mediums. So even if you have a female writing the episode, which the particular episode Miriam's talking about, it was a male, but whoever is writing it, it still is visual. So the fact that Lake decided to, you know, film the approach up to the stage with, you know, for Jay Leno, and how that had an impact on you as a viewer, Miriam, I think is evidence that we need different gazes and we need more female gazes in all of the different positions of filmmaking and TV making, not necessarily just, you know, a token one or two in the writing room, but also in the director's chair, to be able to give us things that were previously thought gratuitous or unnecessary in order to tell the story.
Yeah.
That's really well said. And I know this isn't the movie we're talking about, but you're making me think about like The Eternals, for example, which was directed by Chloe Zhao. And so again, in my head, before really thinking about the impact of a director, shamefully, I was like, okay, so it's a Chloe Zhao movie. It's going to be like visually really pretty, and it's going to be a little more character driven. But I didn't think that the impact was deeper than that. But to your point, like it gets, I think, quite a bit of criticism that it's not a typical Marvel movie. It's not and now I'm wondering, yeah, but isn't that kind of what we want? Like, don't we want to consider and view from different perspectives and create depth? Just by sheer fact, I'm not suggesting that only women provide depth by any stretch, but depth comes from multiple perspectives being viewed, right? So
absolutely. And sidebar, dear God, Marvel needs to evolve. I can't take one more Marvel movie that's exactly like the one before. It is shifting and evolving, but I'd never be one of those people that was disappointed that it has become a little bit more character driven. And I haven't seen Eternals yet. I will though, now that you tell me that.
I really liked it.
Cool.
And we podcasted on it. You can listen to it, Stephen.
If you like and subscribe to us on YouTube, or look for you find our episode.
I mean, and ultimately, like, I'm raising a boy, right? He's almost 10 years old. It's only a matter of time now before he's going to stumble onto some pornography on the internet. And I'm trying my hardest right now to raise him with a strong moral code, a value system that, when he does encounter these things, he'll be able to make good, true judgments about things. But of course he's going to get hooked into the titillation, and he's going to make mistakes, and he's going to do jackass things, and I did too, absolutely. But if by the time he's viewing things, there's so much more of an equal playing field in terms of, I'm not talking about porn now, I guess I'm talking about just film and TV. If he's seeing things that are directed by both male and females, both filmmakers who understand the value in scenes like building tension for Pam as she's walking down the hall to get to that, really stressful interview, and also the action-packed explosions, and all of it's great. But it's been so disproportionate for so long that it's really wonderful to pull it back up to as even as possible.
And you know what, Amanda, like you talk about, I've got two boys myself, 7 and 11, and it's funny. Like, I want to be able to. I know I'm their dad, so I mean, these are. It's always hard to have a conversation like that with your parent. I know that, but I feel like what I want from them is be able to talk not just about, or talk about these conversations and issues with a better understanding of those things, of a depth of different voices, of the importance of women, for the whole of holistic reasons. If you're talking about this, because I mean, growing up, shifting a little bit back to the pornography angle, we were just taught porn's bad. Why is it bad? Because it's bad. And, I grew up in a conservative home. I know that's the way things were. That's what we were taught. That's okay. But like, I didn't have an understanding of the depth of the things that are going on here. And just from the time period from when we grew up, like, remember, I grew up in the era of Salt and Pepper saying, let's talk about sex. And people were like, well, turn the radio off, and it was like, the idea of sexuality, we couldn't talk about it in the same way. And I'm not,
clearly that never dissuaded the staggering amount of people who consume pornography from stopping, though. So it's a real,
well, yes. And now, so when we were growing up, like, porn was expensive and hard to get at.
That's true.
Now it is absolutely free. And what is it, like 80% of the net or something is pornographic material? Like, it's super accessible.
It actually kept the internet going during their crash. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I thought you paused there.
No, but that like, what a staggering truth that is, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it also, I think it's the porn industry that had DVD went out over, or HD, or Blu-ray, went out over HD DVD, wasn't it? Because the industry made a unilateral decision that they weren't going to film in both. And so the world went the way that porn was available, as opposed to that kind of minimizing. So it's a very, very powerful industry, which is scary. But I think that the things we didn't know, or I didn't know anyways growing up, let me speak for myself, that also makes it even more so is one is a lesson I learned watching a Sex and the City episode, which was kind of staggering. But there's an episode where Miranda's dating this guy who is only able to be sexually excited with pornography. And so at first she finds it kind of enticing. She's like, this is pretty cool. And then later they're having sex and he's pushing her head out of the way so he can watch the screen. And so she gets a bit offended. And he says to her, he says, listen, I've just met you. I've had relationships with these women for years. And it really hit me that one of the biggest issues is it creates a false intimacy and connection, creates a relationship with a two-dimensional character, not an actual person. And then the other piece, of course, is there's all the research now about how it rewires brains, especially for young people, right? As our brains are still being fully formed. And so it absolutely changes our pleasure receptors, the ways that we interact, our expectations around connections with other people.
Yeah.
Those are massively like dangerous impacts that, again, growing up being told, porn is, well, one, I was told porn is for boys, which we know is also no longer the truth, right? Women's sexuality is being recognized. But two, also that it was a very bad thing. But without any of the depth of why to be concerned about it, what alternatives to consider, which I think is a really tough conversation for both of you to have as parents, and appreciating that I'm not a parent. So take my perspective for what it's worth, not having the experience. But I think that's the more important part of the conversation is like, what's the value and what are we really seeking? Connection. What are better ways to get that connection? Right.
Yes.
I thought there were a couple of interesting conversations about it in the series. Like, I feel like whenever it was shown, like, for example, there's that scene where Rand is watching porn. He's by himself. He's sitting on like a mattress or something in the room. I thought this looks like a very lonely experience. Now, and at the same time, you've got, forgive me, his ex-wife, the actress, what's her name?
I don't remember the actress. That's the actress's name. I don't remember the character's name.
Erica. And I thought it is very interesting because Erica is talking about it. She's like, this is not the same thing. What we're talking, it was almost like she was drawing a line between objectification and pornography, which was a fascinating conversation to weigh because, obviously, we're talking about stealing someone's private property, someone's private intimate moments and selling them, making money off of them. Of course, she's involved in the industry or was. I'm not sure if she is still at the end or not, but she draws that line. It's very interesting to me across the board.
There's also an interesting commentary you reminded me with the scene in Rand's scene. So when they do the montage to show that the tape is picking up steam and getting a lot of attention of all of the relatively overweight, very unattractive men by themselves with the Kleenex box and the bottle of lotion. I mean, it wonderfully kind of positioned without having to show anything because immediately what that is. But talk about that perpetuating that stereotype of who porn is for, right? Interesting connection. Yeah.
Sorry, Amanda, were you going to say something there?
No, I'm just thinking about all of it again. And I mean, the big, huge, massive conversation that is pornography. And I don't know. I do not know. Yeah. It's just so big. It's such a big, deeply rooted issue in our humanity, that probably has to do with repression, and why it's bad, why sex is bad. So then we have to go underground to seek it out. And then is it a bit of a chicken and egg scenario at this point where enough generations have come up on porn that now they don't really know how to function without it? Like, how much has it messed up our ability for intimacy? I don't know. This is way beyond my awareness. I don't know.
Oh, go ahead, Mir.
No, I had no comments. I was just, agreeing with the sigh in terms of the depth of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I sigh as a mom for sure. I sigh as a mom and a mom of a son, but I also sigh as just like as a human being, as a person who would like to eventually be in another intimate relationship. And I don't know, I sigh for everyone. I sigh for the lonely, overweight guy who feels that's the way he can have a connection. And I sigh for the women who make a living that way, who probably don't want to, like Erica is that trope of the actress who came to Hollywood hoping to be a real actress, but then to pay the bills, she does this other thing. And then I'm sure there are a whole lot of people who would say, don't sigh, Amanda. Like I'm contributing to the economy. I make a good living. I like what I do. I'm empowered. There's a whole realm of feminist pornography that's like, we took it back, don't be so prudish with sexuality. And it is what it is. It's just, there is so much of the porn world that seems unhealthy. That's the part I'm sighing for. But we're an unhealthy society, right? We're really unhealthy, and we're reeling in our lack of unhealthiness now. Yeah. We're like transitioning out of COVID into the threat of nuclear war. Like we're sick right now. We are having a hard time.
Oh yeah, on like 100 different levels too, right? So we're particularly fixated on porn. Interestingly, even though I think part of the point of the show was to say there's that line to both of your comments earlier between pornography and exploitation, and this was private, no releases, not intended to be shared. But you're right. We're sick in so many ways as a society, right? So I think about so again, I read an article where Sebastian Stan was talking about he had to lose, I guess, a bunch of weight to play Tommy Lee. And as a result of that, it really triggered body dysmorphia for him. And so he's really pushing on that. Like, I didn't think I lost enough weight. And now he's like struggling with not feeling thin enough, which is kind of scary when you like objectively look at it from the outside. But then it got me thinking about like diet culture and what it actually means to be healthy at every size. And like, there's just so much that we, hopefully well-intentioned, even if otherwise, like we're just destroying ourselves and happily walking into it. And a lot of it is because that's where the money is.
Oh yeah.
So a lot of it is 100% driven by profit, which is also really scary.
Oh yeah. Oh God. Yeah. And then actors are celebrated for the extremes that they put their bodies through. And yeah, I can totally see why Sebastian Stan would have thought that, because I Googled a few pictures of Tommy Lee and Pamela Anderson to kind of jog my memory. And Tommy Lee's frame is just very thin, very wiry. So, and because he's naked for so much of it, or like very, without clothing, I can totally see why Sebastian Stan wanted to be as committed as possible and dive in deep. But it's like, buddy, you're good, like you're good. You don't need to become the walking, like you don't need to look like him so much. But having said that, can I indulge me just one little question here? Lily James' transformation was incredible. Like it was just amazing. And that carried me through the first 2 episodes. I was just like, oh my God, like the eyebrows, the hair, the mannerisms, the voice tone, and like amazing. How, I'm assuming that because Pamela Anderson has implants, that the breasts that Lily James had for the character were not her own size.
That's right.
If she's fully nude, though, how did they do that? Were they prosthetics?
Oh, yes. So I read about that. Oh, same with Sebastian Stan, because he didn't get any tattoos and he refused to get pierced.
Yes.
So he would spend 2 hours a day in the makeup chair.
Yeah, okay.
And she would spend 3. So her teeth are fake.
Yeah.
She had a breastplate that she would have to put on every day.
Oh.
That helped to create, So she spent 3 hours a day in the makeup chair being like augmented into Pam, and he spent 2 because all of the tattoos, the piercings, all of that was added on.
I just, the breasts was the one thing where I was like, how do you move around and act and like embrace and hug when you have prosthetics and you're totally backless, right? Like she's supposed to be totally nude. So you can't be like wearing a bra or something.
They said it was a breastplate, but even if you think about, so the talking penis scene, because I Googled that too, isn't just a prosthetic, it was an animatronic. So it's a robot.
Right.
And it was controlled. So it was controlled by one or two animators. Is that what they're called? Whatever the guys are that. Yeah, but it actually, like, so the whole time he's having this conversation, there's a guy behind him or two that are actually helping the robot penis to move and respond and interact. So, and it doesn't look, I mean, we're not seeing any wires. We're not seeing any, and the camera's plenty close enough that we would see that stuff. So they have
obviously a different kind of Fraggle Rock going on.
Right?
Wow.
I cannot watch Fraggle Rock again. Now that
Wow.
Yeah, that scene's wild. I mean, it's not even just that it's his naked frame. That's not what I'm talking. It's that it's talking to him that is such a bizarre moment. Well,
maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's something to like why, and they only chose it for one episode. But maybe who I've got Wikipedia open. It was episode 2, right? That was one. I Love You, Tommy, directed by Craig Gillespie, written by Robert Siegel. I don't know. Maybe there's something to the symbolism there of like, you know, for so many years, it's been white males who've driven decisions, society, pop culture that, you know, Robert Siegel and Craig Gillespie just wanted to like make it as overt as possible. Like the world up until now has been primarily run by men who really put so much stock in their fucking penises.
So true.
Although we talked about this, Miriam, before we did this recording, that the penis is kind of the voice of reason to an extent, ironically.
Yeah.
Is it though?
It's true.
Like I see in that scene, I'm like, I was cheering for Tommy Lee. I was like, because he was the one saying, no, I actually do love her. And they're like, oh, you can get as many women as you can. There's way more.
That's true.
And I'm like, no, man. Don't but whatever that thing is.
It felt like the voice of reason, though, in the sense of trying to create a balancing perspective, like which I think less maybe sexually driven. We've all had those conversations with ourselves or with somebody else, like, hey, don't be crazy. You just met this woman. You just met this guy. You're like, slow down. You have, you know, this isn't this or bust. Like, and so in that sense, the penis who was voiced by
I'll tell you. I've got IMDb open here.
He always does like bad guys or crazy guys. That's the voice. Mantzoukas.
Jason Mantzoukas.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, well played, right? Is that dichotomy? I hear you, because it was like, oh, we could get, you know, Denise Richards. She looked at us pretty good, or let's right? But the idea, I think, for me, I read it as an intended kind of balancing of like, slow down, which wouldn't have been bad advice. I mean, the other thing that I wonder about as well is I wonder if this sex tape hadn't happened to them, and if they hadn't spent all of their time not really being able to fully step into the other's perspective on like the impact of it, would their relationship have lasted? Yeah. Would it just have lasted a little bit longer? I mean, they did. So I Googled both of them, and they've both been married quite a few times. So obviously I don't know if it's like a love addiction or just like that deep desire for like being, meeting your person and kind of having a partner. But they did get back together for a bit. I mean, Pam also did with Kid Rock twice. And so but it just made me wonder, like, if this hadn't happened, would they have just been married a little bit longer, but still fallen into the this isn't working?
Mhm.
Or might they have grown into being able to be together on a much more permanent scale? I don't know.
Yeah.
I will say that this is my one defense of Tommy Lee, and he's reprehensible in this, but that's the moment where I actually went, okay, Tommy, there's something there. Like, there, I really believed throughout most of this series, even though he was erratic and he was like doing horrible things, especially to other men, I believe he still cared about her. I never thought that for a second he was using her or was only sexual. Like, this was the scene that I think takes that and really hammers that home, is and so in that sense, there was something about Tommy Lee where I was like, man, this guy's a jerk, but I believe there's something really there. And I thought the series went out of its way to really try and show that there was something there other than their sexual attraction. And to me, I thought that mattered. To me, that mattered.
Absolutely.
Totally agree. And I think in my let's justify Tommy's behaviors thinking, which I kind of cut myself off of, but also this is, again, just the world according to Mira, but my interpretation is that he almost so in trauma theory, there are times, and depending on when trauma hits in your development, it impacts the development of your brain, right? So sometimes what happens is you end up freezing at the level of development you were at when you experience the trauma. And while I don't know Tommy Lee's history in terms of trauma, I certainly got the impression from, again, this characterization in the film that he was, I think, well-intentioned. And he did very much, I would say, not just care deeply for her, like really loved her, really wanted a family, really. But his ability to think through his behaviors was exceptionally limited. And that I'm sure was compounded with all the drugs and the alcohol and the, like, all the, the rock star lifestyle. And also the lack of consequences at that level, right? He's got enough money to not have to deal with the consequences of behaviors that might have helped somebody else to choose different behaviors moving forward. But yeah, I mean, for sure, just like this hothead that keeps compounding things and making them worse. But his intention, like even the scene with Rand where he's burns the money at the end, right? And not that it wouldn't have corrected anything at this point. It was way too late. But I thought there was power in him going, but okay, me, fine, I deserve it. But what about Pamela? Like, sweet, innocent, like really the person you've hurt the most is her. And you were trying to hurt me. Yeah.
The two of them, all the men are interesting at, embodying a lot of the character deficits and lacking in awareness, in compassion, in empathy, in patience.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, I think we could keep going here, but I think we should probably reel it in. This has been wonderful, but let's screen it or skip it. Pam and Tommy, screen it or skip it.
I would say screen it for sure. I love anything that gives you pause to go, I didn't think of it that way. And it had never occurred to me to slow down and think about Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee and this disgruntled carpenter, and about violations of privacy, particularly when it comes to celebrities. So I am all for an entertaining way to get you to think about, like, where is the line there? And if it means that I then pause before I decide to do something that could perpetuate or really hurt someone because I took a few days to watch a series like that, then yeah, absolutely. And it is entertaining too. Like it was good storytelling.
Yeah.
I know they embellished in certain parts, but the plot points that they chose to highlight, I found myself really like, I was feeling a lot. I was crying. I was, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Like I was invested. I went on that roller coaster ride. And that to me is like, that's why I love curling up and watching something. I like to be entertained for sure. I like to escape, but then I also don't mind if at the end of it, I'm left thinking and contemplating.
Yep. Yes. So it took me a moment, and I think this is my pause, is I would also say screen it, but screen it like a book club. You need people to talk with about it, either after certain episodes or after the series. Like this is not that was entertaining and then put it aside, kind of screen it. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. That's why I said to you both, I'm like, it has been so hard for me to find people who would discuss this. Because for me, it's a screen it. And I say that, first of all, with an asterisk, because some people who may be watching this may be sensitive to graphic content. There's lots. If you're sensitive to graphic content, don't screen it. But I will say that I've seen two things that I felt spoke about sexuality and pornography in particularly intelligent ways. It was this, and it was Don John. Joseph Gordon-Levitt's Don John is so intelligent, and tries to hit on some of these markers. They're totally different stories. And I mean, man, I grew up in the church, and I'm a pastor, and we've never been able to talk about this well. We just can't. And it's like, it actually breaks my heart, because there's so many important issues that I think we all need to address in and outside the church, and that are brought up in this series. And because of the nature of it, or even whether it's not about the content or the salacious story of it, people are just, that I've spoken to, have been unwilling to engage the series. But my gosh, I would rather watch a series like this that takes those things and even that content and uses it for conversations, deeper conversations, than say, and I'm just going to pick out something in the air, but say something like Game of Thrones, which was using it for more exploitative. And I'm not hating on Game of Thrones. I'm just saying they're used so differently. I mean, I thought it was really good. It was well done.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I want to add, sorry, I know this is past the screen script, but just one comment on the church piece, because I'm so right there with you on that one. And I think that's part of why a lot of folks don't want to talk about it. But I also want to push that when there was the room to talk about it, was like that one weekend youth group when you talk about sex, and the girls talk to the female leader and the boys talk to the male leader. I think it is so important to actually have a multi-perspective conversation. And that includes both genders, that includes like people on the spectrum of sexuality, so LGBTQ plus, folks who are asexual. Like, we really, to do this justice and actually grow and learn, we need to invite perspectives that are not our own to the conversation.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. If I could applaud on a podcast, I would. I think that's right. It's funny, like, I think it was you, Amanda. We talked about all the madness that we're going on in a culture, and we're scared to talk about sex. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Of all the things, not us, we have, but I mean, on a cultural level, I'm like, there are so many other things that are, anyway, I'm gonna rabbit trail here. Thank you to you both. Honestly, this has been really meaningful, and I appreciate your perspective, and I appreciate you both tremendously for having this conversation with me. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, Steve.
Yeah, ditto. It's been great to talk about.
Well, I appreciate it, and I really do. And for you at home, a reminder: you can find us wherever podcasts are available. You can like and subscribe us on YouTube. And if you want to have some small group questions to get the conversation started where you are. You can download Fishing for More by going to the podcast page for this episode, and hopefully get the conversation started. Because like Mira said, this is not a show you just watch for fun. This is a show that you want to engage. And as we have here, the three of us. And so I thank you again. And for you at home, we started the conversation. This was Screenfish.